Okay, this is going to be one about the Queen of Sheba and her ancient connections. Yemenites are people that were proto-Yemenites, if you will, and the people that lived in that area and around the Red Sea, even on the Egyptian side, also at one point, and through the Horn of Africa. And what's known about them in ancient times. This is a painting about it. This would be Solomon here, and his woman, the queen, if you will, here, not just some concubine. And then this is the Queen of Sheba that's here. Interesting, they have lady fan bearers here that are here, so fan maidens, if you will. And they have a monkey here with a little fan too, like they've trained him also to fan people. If you look around though, and of course this is a later art, they'll show people that look a little Romanesque or Celtic even. And there's some blonde-haired people in there and here, and redheads there, and blonde there, and there's a redheaded lady that's here, and so on. There's another blonde-headed guy right between those, and a blonde-headed girl right here, and so on. So, oh, another one right there. If you just keep looking, there's quite a few that you mix in, but even somebody dressed like a jester, it seems, and so on. We see a lot of iconography around on here. If you just look at the architecture, it kind of looks like with the columns and stuff that it's somewhere between Greek and Persian and Egyptian, if you will. And if you think about where Solomon's temple is supposed to have been and its iconography and things, that would probably go with it well. You can see all of these lions lined up through his staircase that leads up to it. And we've talked about lions quite a bit. There was Barbary lions all around the Mediterranean, North Africa, and out into the Middle East, through Samaria, and it seems like the Tigris River was probably the barrier of where they came, and tigers are on the other side of that. But there was also even a non-maned lion that used to exist in the northern regions, and it no longer exists anymore. But there were lions that were used in the um, gladiator fights and things like that, and most of those were a Barbary type of lion. They're taken from North Africa and Carthage and all those places and dwindle them out. Recently there was a video of a guy showing one that through one of those ravines there's a Barbary lion right there too. You can make a difference because they have extra hair under their armpits and so on. And you kind of see that in the iconography of these guys whenever they make them into different things that look like Chimera, Lamassu also. But let's just get into this. For what we're looking at is this Queen of Sheba here, Caucasians of course, and how that connects to the Bible and their ancient gold source they've talked about here. The Ethiopian gold mine that may have supplied the Queen of Sheba with her riches. Wow, I hope this hasn't been off the entire time. Let me see if I can get this better centered for y'all. There we go. Ever wondered where the Queen of Sheba got her gold from? Sudan and Ethiopia are both in the region of what was the Kingdom of Sheba. So that's where the people lived, and those were the people of ancient times. Through much more modern, we're going to discuss the timeline of that also. And people try to give weird integrations. And both of these places, though, have ancient mines. In fact, the Azosa zone of Ethiopia could contain the oldest gold mine in the world at 6,000 years old. Oddly, we find gold ornaments that predate that, though, that we've talked about here recently, and Scythians and so on, too. But, of course, there was the people of the Golden Fleece, which we'll kind of touch upon here, too, and how that connects to this story. But they used to collect gold through a sifting type of thing, like river water sifting, from using sheep fleece or their skins. And so there was a connection to what mythology and truth goes out of things. But let's go into this one. Some geologists have argued that this zone is still rich with the precious metal, but whether this region where the Queen of Sheba sourced her gold remains speculation. In a region where prospects for gold deposits still abound, Where does one start to search for an ancient gold mine? Well, a good prospect was found during a 2012 excavation in Ethiopia when a British archaeologist team may well have found the answer. The Queen of Sheba is a most famous biblical legend as the ruler who visited Jerusalem with loads of gold in order to impress King Solomon. Little else is known about her, but the tale of her love affair with King Solomon inspired later mystical medieval literature in which she is described as possessing divine wisdom. She was also depicted in Turkish and Persian art and was featured in Handel's Horatio Solomon. She is also mentioned in various treaties and the Kabbalah, and her story was later in the subject of Hollywood movies such as Solomon and Sheba of 1959. The legend states that she taunted the king with wisdom and riddles that he wooed her in return. Their child, Menelik, was the ancestor of the kings of Abyssinia. Well, where's Abyssinia? Well, the area that we think of as Ethiopia today, kind of not the Horn, but out there somewhat. That's pretty much Abyssinia. In fact, through the Persians and people Meroe that we know of, that's Cambyses' sister, named for her, apparently married into this situation. During a little different timeline than we're really discussing here, but well, we're discussing all of it. So let's go ahead and look at the knowledge that's given here whenever we look for Ethiopia. So we're clear in understanding. I've shown this information quite a few times, but ancient Ethiopia, it's not just E, but spelled with A-E in front of it. That was the old Greek term, and so this is something totally different. They tell you that he's in the works of Homer and twice in the Iliad and 3 times in the Odyssey, and Greek historian Herodotus specifically uses appellation to refer to such parts as Africa were known within the inhabited world. In classical antiquity, Africa, or ancient Libya, which is what they called it, we'll look at this picture in a second, referred to as what is known Maghreb in the south of the Libyan desert and western Sahara, including the desert land west of the southern Nile River, so on the side of the river too. Geographical knowledge of this gradually grew with Greek travelogue Periplus of the Erythraean Sea back in the 1st century AD, describing areas along the Red Sea. And so they started writing what others had written and so on. But strangely, in this area right here, they talk about these Macrobians. We'll get into that shortly. But so it basically means sunburnt faces. It has to do with Memnon, and in 515, skylights of Carandia and orders of Darius I, the Persian king. Achaemenid Empire sailed along the Indus River, Indian Ocean, Red Sea, circumnavigating the Arabian Peninsula. He mentioned Ethiopians as well as writings have not survived, basically. So, Hecatus of Miletus in 500 BC also have written a book about Ethiopia, but his writing is not known, only through quotations from later authors. He stated that Ethiopia was located east of the Nile, as far as the Red Sea and Indian Ocean, and he is quoted as relating a myth which sciapods, let's see if it shows a picture here. Yeah, these people, and you can tell they're Caucasians too, but they have such big feet that they shade themselves by sticking it up to shade from the sun. It's a weird story, right? Whose feet were supposedly large enough to serve as a shade, they lived there. They also talk about Cambyses here and his lines. Where are we looking at? Herodotus defines Ethiopia as the farthest region of Libya, which is what they called all of Africa. We'll look at that picture here in a second. Yeah, Egyptian priest Manetho listed Kushite 25th dynasty, calling it Ethiopians, but the Greek form of it. Moreover, when the Hebrew was translated into Greek, Hebrew appellation Cush or Kushite became in Greek Ethiopians, appearing as Ethiopia in the King James Version. So now we have to do with Kushites. And I've done a video recently how if you look up the ancient viceroys of Kush, they were all controlled by the Egyptians, but then you look into it more and it's not at all what modern day people are trying to say, or some people are trying to say. Um, with regard to Ethiopians, Strabo indicates that they look similar to Indians, people from India, those who are in Asia, but then he says South India, but Asia is not South India, and those who are in Africa do not differ from each other. Well, there are Aryans in both places too, but they're trying to pull off this dark skin concept and say that it's that, but it actually means sunburned. These people that we're trying to talk about now that are in Abyssinia don't do it. He also writes that Ethiopia is derived from Aethiop, which is a son of Vulcan, of Hephaestus, and how that works with blacksmiths and things like that. And those guys aren't black people, of course, either. They were the ancient dwarven gods that were building these incredible things. But he also writes that the queen of the Ethiopians bore the title of Kandake. We know that word is Candace, and avers that the Ethiopians had conquered ancient Syria and the Mediterranean. What? Yeah, ancient Syria. Yeah, that was the area. So, uh, to- totally not what you're thinking now, huh? While following Strabo, the Greco-Roman Eusebius notes that the Ethiopians had immigrated into the Red Sea area from the Indus Valley, and there were no people in the region by that name prior to their arrival. But we find that there were some people living there. And so when we look at this picture, there's something strange that you'll see. Well, even here at the top, you can't really see it in this picture if I try to get it to come down. All these brown areas here are where they'd said were Aethiopians. Now, today we think of Ethiopia as being here, but in the Macrobians, it even says, and I was trying to find it in there, that they were the most fairest and a very tall people. They ate fish and lived long, long lives. Yeah, that's it. And that's where they're pinned off between and so on. And of course, Meroe is sounded here, but if you look, they don't know that sub-Saharan Africa exists. Yeah, it's not really shown. In fact, they think that the Nile bends around here at Meroe and goes all the way to the Atlas Mountains. And in most maps where it shows this, whenever it looks like their actual cartography, it says Atlantes right here. And a lot of people have equated that with the Eye of Zara. Yet we see in the Celtic land there are peoples too, and if we look around, it's at the edge of river valleys and the end of river valleys everywhere, and that had been started everywhere, including the side of Egypt here. But conspicuously, there's a good blob right in the middle of the Caucasus Mountains too. And so no one in their right mind would try to claim that the people that are in Ethiopia nowadays is pretty much a 50-50 mix, hybrid type of people, of admix, were in any way these people they're talking about. When we find genetics and look into that, and where they find there was integration a long time ago with those people. So we're talking about people who were Caucasians living in all this area. And that about settles that. But let's check out more for the Sabaeans, is what we're really talking about. Queen of Sheba and those type of things. So they have a Sabaean language, and it's kind of like, weirdly, it looks a little like, I can't get it to pull up on here. Whenever I do, it looks somewhat like a Meisei language and a few others. In fact, there are some characters in here, the backwards looking F, B, and D, and so on, that look very Phoenician, and scripts that had come from that also. But Sabaeans are mentioned several times in the Hebrew Bible. In the Quran, they are described as either Shaba or Shaba, or the people of Tuba. Quam Tuba. That's weird. Tuba, Tubal Cain. Swatch these words around. Tubal Cain. Is that anything to do with it? Well, so they say that their kingdom starts around 1200 BC, but really it's about 400 years before that, but it gets this bam going on. We'll look at one of the sites here in a second. And these Sabaeans, let's see where, if it says it right here. They eventually got conquered by the Himyarites and so on, but sorry guys. Well, I can tell you this part here. They performed the ceremonial location. They ran several times, 7 times, between the mounts of Safa and Moraseh. This was this ritual that they had 7 times. They threw rocks and washed themselves after sexual intercourse. This is totally separate. They're not doing this together. And also gargled. They sniffed water up into their noses. What are you talking about? Well, to get rid of the dust and things, and then blow their nose back out and so on. But it talks about it. They clipped their fingernails, removed pubic hair, and performed ritual circumcision also. Likewise, they cut off the right hand of a thief, especially if he's right-handed, and stoned adulterers. That sounds somewhat biblical, and we understand that. So, we know that she's in the Bible and got with Solomon and the Queen of Sheba and the whole story that's there. Sabaeans are mentioned in the Bible in the books of Job, Joel, Ezekiel, and Isaiah. The book of Job mentions them of having slain Job's livestock and servants. In Isaiah, they are described as tall stature. So there we go with it again. They're real tall people. Are they giants? Is that what we're trying to say? Well, let's look at some of their art and compare that to what people have been saying. Oh, wow. It cuts his head off here. Can I get that to quit? So, look at this picture here, and it's very much Caucasian. It looks a little bit like Elvis, and he has a beard up under the bottom of his chin, as opposed to a full setting of it, curled around. What's odd is they found that some of these are painted. And they used to be painted, and so on. So we can pretty easily tell what ethnology these people look like. But if you were to just look up old Sabaean art, you'll see a lot of alabaster work and things like that. And a lot of people have made the comment that it really looks somewhat Proto-Greekish looking. Here's another look at that script. And here's a site, which I guess you can't see that fantastically, but there's this checkerboard that's on the walls here. What I always found strange whenever I first saw this was, well, that'd be perfect for a thief to climb up and stuff, you know, like Dungeons and Dragons. Well, what's the way in the castle? Well, duh. Looks like you could, like a rock wall that they use nowadays, to just climb right up that thing. It's done in a textured type form, but there's all this sculpting and rock art too that's here that makes up the staircases into places and so on like that. That this whole thing is built on this ancient shelf that's there. There used to be a big dam that was there also, and this is the ruins of part of that historical dam. For at one time, this little bit of water that you see that's in this thing used to be up quite full, and they had this reservoir that got busted a long time ago, and so kind of changed off there. So we've looked at that. I can't find the exact quote that we're looking for, that I was looking for in here, but let's just go ahead and go back to this Ethiopian gold mine and these Queen of Sheba, and so now we know who they're talking about, even though in a minute he's going to try to allude in some other way again. So she was also depicted in Turkish and Persian art and was featured in Handel's Horatio Solomon. So this is depictions of her well known, and they don't compare to that modern thing that people are trying to say. Well, some people. She is also mentioned in various treatises, the Kabbalah, her story of the later subject of Hollywood movies such as Solomon and Sheba. All right, she was an ancient realm. Sheba was an ancient realm that existed during the 8th century BC. It lasted for 1,000 years and included what is now modern Ethiopia and Yemen. The realm traded in incense and prospered because of its links with Jerusalem and the Roman Empire. Its famous queen is mentioned both in the Quran and the Bible, which of course are connected anyhow, which mentions that the Queen of Sheba arrived in Jerusalem with a very great retinue with camels bearing spices. So camels, we talked about camels, but and very much gold and precious stones. Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold and a very great quantity of spices. So, of course, she's trying to impress him with like, boom, like people do. So this is a picture of the arrival of the Queen of Sheba by Apollonio di Giovanni. And this is her arrival here, coming to meet with these other people. You can see her retinue of people have red and blonde hair and everything, and easily see the ethnology of this. But this man tries to mention in here, racial depictions are not accurate as the Queen of Sheba. Yeah, it is. She wasn't black or a 50-50 admixed or anything like that. No, that's people trying to say what's going on in a modern time was going on 4,000 years ago or whatever, and that's not in any way, shape, or form what was going on. You can also see this Jerusalem contingency and how they look, but they're drawn in modern garb, almost Victorian looking age, right? And even the horses and how they're gilded and things like that. And that looks like the more modern depiction where they showed Tuatha De Nan and stuff like that. Well, there's a reason that it looks like that too. There's a reason she looks like Caucasians, and all these people do, of course. The biblical stories of Sheba were written in the Iron Age. Several figures in the Bible are referred to as Sheba, one of them being a descendant of Noah's son Shem, Bing. However, the name of Sheba is actually a derivation of the Arabic Shaba, also known as the Sabaean kingdom. The story of its famous queen appears in the biblical book of Kings. Its capital was the city of Merib, but the kingdom declined after a long civil war between numerous dynasties who each claimed the throne. Things like that happen in places, and this thing lasted for over 1,000 years. But slowly but surely, after decay, wham, things went to different places like Mecca and so on, and no longer were these the places. I recently saw a video, which I'd really like to do another video on. It would almost take a series, but because it's about a 45-50 minute video, but it's a guy who had made connections in an ancient Krakatoa video of 535 and what happens to people in different places during that same time, and how it makes connections, and how that shattered empires and things, ended up being the fall of the Roman Empire and so on. Sadly, if I showed more than a 10-second clip, though, I'd probably get flagged for it. Makes me want to just put it in the comments. Maybe I'll make a little video going, hey, look at this video, and but I don't want to say, well, stop at 2 minutes and 12 seconds and come back to my video and let me tell you about that, and then go back and go back. It's gotten to be silly whenever you're using it for expressive purposes. In 2012, a team of British archaeologists discovered an enormous gold mine in the north of Ethiopia, along with a nearby battlefield and the ruins of a temple. The site is located on the high Gibraltar Plateau, and the archaeologists knew it was once part of the realm of Sheba from the 20-foot steel carved with the image of the sun and the crescent moon, the emblem of Sheba. That also is a connective that we've talked about. I talk a lot about symbolisms. So here's a look at the landscape of it there, and it looks kind of like the desert southwest, but there's different kinds of trees and bushes there. It gets just a little bit more rainfall than that too. But one of the things I've always loved about archaeology is the way it can tie up legends and myths. Archaeologist Louise Schofield told The Guardian shortly after the discovery, "The fact that we might have the Queen of Sheba's mines is extraordinary." Well, if we're looking in the desert up basically south in Egypt, up the Nile and that whole area that's out there, they called it Nuba, And Nuba doesn't have to do with those people that are there. A lady later gets conflagrated with them, but Nuba means gold, and that was the area that they used to get their gold from the way back. And so we might be looking at an Egyptian mine and stuff and connectives of that too. For there was two Nubas in ancient Egypt. You can look and find this on maps people have made correlations to. There's one way up close to the delta that's on the eastern side of the Nile, and that one drew dry over a time and they weren't getting anything, but there was up there that they could go get it at. Of course, much later the Nubians came in and there were problems with them and so on. After a while, it seems like they domesticated them, got them more in contact with what they were, and got them mining the gold for themselves, but they were still outlawed from coming into Egypt itself by decrees, like the Semna Stele of Senusret III. But so they would have stopped at Icon or some place like that and traded it in. But the Khoisan and Bantuid type people, Congoids and West African sub-Saharans, didn't know any of this existed and really aren't related to those people. But anyhow, despite being warned the rock was the home of enormous cobra, yep, there's a mythology that hooks up with this, Schofield crawled beneath where it was, and she discovered an inscription in Sabaean, an ancient language that would once have been spoken by the Queen of Sheba herself. On a mound nearby, the archaeologists discovered the ruins of an ancient temple that may have been dedicated to the moon god of Sheba. The team also discovered human bones on the site of an ancient battlefield nearby. I'm wondering what archaeology we can get out of that. Anybody know we can trace something down out of that? Like to see what comes out of that, craniometry and such. The ancient mine is believed to have once belonged to the Queen of Sheba. It was situated on a hilltop and entered by a shaft which is buried some 4 feet below the surface. The archaeologists found a human skull in the entrance, where chisel marks are still visible. It may indeed once have supplied the Queen of Sheba's treasure house, or ancient Egyptians, or both. So that's neat. They found that ancient mine, and they're trying to hook it up with this Queen of Sheba, who is Caucasian there, and of course all these people were of that area. People in modern day, due to a PC and a want so bad to be inclusive, to actually try to stray away from reality of the way things were in ancient times. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. We'll get on to another story about a 9-foot giant. What's up with that? Peace.